Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I am Jake.
And this is Unpopular Culture, and today we're going to be looking at the first episode of Jessica Jones.
And now sometimes we might do more than one episode. Sometimes we'll do 1, 2, or 3, depending on how the story works. But there's a lot to get through in this first episode. So you just strap in, just buckle down in, and you just listen to us talk. That's really all you need to do.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and check out the first episode of Jessica Jones, aka Ladies' Night.
Written by Melissa Rosenberg. This actually has a lot of women writers, which is good because she's a woman protagonist, and I'm happy with that. Throughout this series, it doesn't feel like a forced character. Does that make sense? It seems very true.
I'll tell you the difference. The difference between a well-written female character and a badly written female character. For instance, right now we have a really good example because Supergirl is on TV right now, which is another female superhero show. And I wish there was more female superhero shows and female characters in general. But the thing Supergirl does wrong is that it's entirely focused, and maybe not entirely, but a huge focus is, I'm a superhero and a girl! Like, that's the whole premise.
She has a vagina, okay. But Jessica Jones is more of like, she's a complex character, and her gender really doesn't even matter.
See, the thing is, though, it doesn't have to not inform it at all. Because part of the story is definitely informed by it because of the whole rape situation, but it isn't her defining feature. It's a thing that happened to her, and it definitely is a part of who she is, but she, at the end of the day, isn't female superhero Jessica Jones. She's superhero Jessica Jones who happens to be female.
Exactly, and that's perfect. That's the perfect way to do it. And right off the bat, it's differently shot than Daredevil, which is good because I didn't want it to be the same series. Daredevil has a lot of slow, very well put together cinematographer wet dream sort of shots where they're just beautiful shots. And this one, it's very. You had mentioned to me while we were talking about this that they have a lot of low angle shots, making the city feel huge. I don't know. It just seems more. It fits her style much more than a slow, calculating Daredevil does. You know what I mean?
I think it's impressive, honestly, because they're filming in New York, again, obviously, in a very similar area of New York. They both work in Hell's Kitchen, but they've been able to make this show very visually distinct from Daredevil to the point where if I didn't know they were connected, I wouldn't know they were necessarily the same exact setting, even though, obviously, New York, still, they made it look very distinct. And what I noticed was Daredevil and I'm watching Daredevil again with my girlfriend now because she's never seen it, and Jessica Jones has now convinced her to watch that. Daredevil is very good at it. Has very big shots, like it's wide, and then you can see a lot of the action. And they linger for a while on shots, whereas Jessica Jones, I've noticed some of the shots, they're very still. They're closer on the people's faces, and often it'll be framed almost like a comic book panel. Like, I remember one distinctly, Malcolm, who is sort of the druggie in this show. There's a scene where he's talking to Jessica, and there's a row of, like, scaffolding above them. Just the framing of the shot and how often the distance you can see the lines converge. It looked very much like a comic book panel to me. I could see it drawn, in a comic book. Very cool stuff like that. This series definitely more stylized because of David Tennant and whatnot being the Purple Man in this show. You have tons of shots where there's, even when it doesn't really make sense for it to be there, there's sometimes streaks of purple light, and the city itself has sort of a purple hue to it. It's very cool because it gives the impression that you're seeing the city through Jessica's eyes, and that's why things look this way.
Right, and that's why there's sort of a red-orange burnt hue to the Daredevil series, because it's through his eyes. So yeah, I like it. I like that they're going with a different style, one that fits her, especially because she's so much more chaotic and self-destructive than Daredevil ever could be. I really like that we're not starting off with... It's not really a focus on her, it's a focus on the events around her the first episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we're getting to know her, but it's not like, here's an introduction episode. We're already in stride with her as soon as we land after the title sequence, which, by the way, great title sequence. I really dig it. It's got a very good comic book vibe. But we start out, she's already investigating shit. You know what I mean? Like, we're not at the beginning, we're in the middle.
She's investigating Luke Cage, actually, which you'll find out for reasons later. But she is following him around. Again, we have this night shots, low angles, stuff like that, and she has sort of a noir voiceover where she's talking about the city and investigating. I would give my one criticism is that Kristen Ritter, I believed her in most of this as Jessica Jones, but for some reason, all the noir voiceovers, it didn't quite ring true to me. I don't know what it is.
I think when they're sarcastic, they're better, but sometimes it'll just be like her inner thoughts while she's doing a thing, which is good, but sometimes it seems like she's giving too much exposition. It doesn't take me out of it. The first time it took me out of it a little bit. I think the first couple episodes, they're a little rough, but as they move on, they get more into stride when she does that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Sure, I could understand.
Sometimes she'll say like, "Oh shit," but in her head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
it seems like when she's trying to be hard-boiled detective, it doesn't, and she is a PI, but she's not in the 1940s.
She's good at it too, though. Like I think kind of maybe it's because she doesn't come across as this confident, good at her job person because she's just so blasé about the whole thing. Like she's drinking and like doesn't give a fuck really. But when she actually goes and does it, she's extremely good at it.
Yeah.
So in her head is different than she's presenting outwardly. So it's a little disjointed, and that might be on purpose.
Maybe. So after she checks out Luke Cage and she's taking pictures of him at night, she goes to see this lawyer, Jerry Hogarth, and this is actually interesting. Carrie Ann Moss plays her here, but in the comics, this is actually a male character and was introduced in Iron Fist, and she becomes basically the Defender's lawyer because they're heroes for hire, and since they operate as a legal business, they need a lawyer. But here they turned her into a woman, and she's a lesbian, and she has a big arc with her new girlfriend and her ex-wife. It's actually very interesting, and I know you liked this for a pretty specific reason.
Yeah, I like it because normally when we get any version of a same-sex couple in media, it tends to be this sort of like, see, they can be loving too, sort of thing. Like they have to be like a paragon of relationships, when really Jerry's kind of an asshole, like a big asshole to her wife and soon to be ex-wife, because through this they're pretty much getting a divorce because she's cheating on her wife with the hot secretary. But I like that it's treated like, yeah, like they can be shitty to each other. It's not a big deal. It's just, it's so well done. It doesn't ever feel like, here's some lesbians for you. Huh? It's not HBO. It's just, this person is a lawyer who happens to be a lesbian, and she has some shit going wrong with her relationship, and that's part of her arc and part of her plot, but it's not forced down your throat as a lesbian relationship. It's given to you as a relationship that happens to be lesbian. Much akin to Jessica Jones happening to be a woman. You know what I mean? They're just doing a really good job of it.
Yeah. So Jerry gives her this assignment because she does investigations for her sometimes to serve papers to this douchey guy. She does some investigating and stuff, and I want to give the show this. The investigations, and you briefly mentioned this, investigation shows are really hard to do when you're supposed to have a private detective who's like really good, and there's a pit you can fall in writing in this. I'm sure there's a name for it, but I don't know what it is, where your detective is so good that it falls into implausibility. I think Sherlock falls into this, but that's kind of the character, so I enjoy that.
Batman too.
Batman's
when they do detective specific stuff. But yeah, no, I agree with you. They swim and they never tread water and they never sink.
This show, though, it does the investigations perfectly because she's definitely competent. You can see she is a very good PI. She makes connections in her head, but there's never was a time where I saw a leap that didn't make any sense. It was
not
always
like old 50s Batman.
Yeah, like
Batman.
where it was like the C sounds like C, Catwoman. You know, that's like old Batman. This was all made sense. All her methods seemed like something that a PI would use, calling on the phone, pretending to be someone else.
Yeah, I was gonna say I really like that she's not always like, I don't know, this moral character.
Yeah,
where she will lie to get what she needs to get done. She'll use a fake voice on the phone, or she'll lie to someone to get into a place to do, or she'll steal from a hospital.
Yeah, like
no big deal to her. It's great.
That's what I like about the characters on this show. Daredevil is a great show. Don't get me wrong, but Matt Murdock himself, even as he presents himself as though he's this dark character, and he does some shitty things, but for the most part, he's doing it for mostly moral reasons.
He's the Captain America of the Defenders, though.
Sure.
I mean, he's the moral spearhead of it, and then everyone else is going to fall in different stratas of it, and she will be the very bottom rung.
Yeah, she and all the characters around her,
In
they
the
all
best
kind
way, and I don't mean she's a bad thing. I mean
No.
that's the best way. Yeah,
I would agree. And it's funny because she's in a situation in which, yeah, she kind of has to do shitty things to get things to go right, but we'll touch on that as it happens. But she has more conversations with Luke Cage because she does end up going to see him eventually
by the
at
way,
the
Luke
bar.
Cage, fucking awesome.
Oh,
What
yeah.
what a good cast. I don't know his name, but he just does a really good. He's been in stuff before. He does a really good job, and it makes me immediately look forward to the Luke Cage series because he's a good actor. He carries himself in a nice way. It's really cool.
Yeah, he's got. I didn't know that much about Luke Cage before the show was announced. I'd seen him in some things before, some brief comic mentions. I've seen him in like Marvel video games and stuff, but I didn't know that much about him. I researched a little bit before the show came out, and I thought that's kind of weird. I don't know how well that's going to work on a show. But
he was a blaxploitation character at first.
Yeah, the direction they've gone with Mike Coulter, who plays him. Great decision making. I don't know exactly how he's in the modern comic books. I assume he is more similar to this, but he just comes off as a very cool dude, a very strong person who's dealt with some shit in his past, but he's trying to get past it and do his own thing. I'm excited for Luke Cage very much because of his performance. But anyway, after they hang out for a little while, Jessica gets another call, and this is from people looking for their daughter named Hope Schlottman. So she does more investigative stuff, goes to an Asian restaurant where she apparently was, and then it turns out that this is a restaurant she had gone to with David Tennant's character like a year before when she was under his control.
Used to be an Italian restaurant, though, right?
Yes, and this is one of my favorite shots of the whole series, comes from this first episode, and it's Jessica's in this restaurant, and she has a flashback, but they don't just, like, have a bright light and they flashback, they kind of push the camera forward into the back of her head, she starts walking forward, and then it's the scene from the past, and she's third person, sort of watching it unfold.
Shot.
That was a great shot, great direction, it was beautiful, and it was very smooth. I mean, it's pretty obvious how they did it. When they push in on her head, they cut, and they change it, but it was all very smooth. Sure. Worked out very well. Visually, this ties into her whole PTSD issue, which she has. My favorite thing that Ritter does in this series is all the acting in relation to her trauma and the PTSD.
Absolutely. She does a really good job. Obviously, she was cast as Jesse's girlfriend in Breaking Bad, and everyone who's watched that knows how fucking broken of a person she was. She's even more broken in this one and handles it so well. Like, she does fake confidence so perfectly, and then she does genuine horror, anguish, and hurt. I'm never not convinced. How about that? And she does a really, really great job. I'm actually impressed because she seemed, in the other things I've seen her in, a little one note. She always came across as, I'm bitchy and kind of intense and also pretty attractive, but I like to drink, And it is all those things, but there's layer of actual humanity in there.
I think
she's doing a really great job.
I think that's why it works here, is because when she's weakest, it's when she's trying to play super sarcastic and confident, which is the character. But I think when you peel back that layer, it's intentional. It's supposed to be she's kind of a person who's dealt with a lot of stuff, and underneath there's insecurity and fear, and she's trying to cover that up with sort of the bravado. And I think it's intentional. I think that's why sometimes when she's delivering some of that snarky dialogue, the snarky stuff is there, but when she's trying to be super confident, it doesn't necessarily ring totally true for me. I think it's intentional. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm giving her too much benefit of the doubt, but that's how I see it, at least. So after the restaurant is actually a really good scene also where she becomes incredibly desperate to get out of the city. She goes to Hope's parents, says, you need to check out of your hotel now, leave. Then she goes to try and call an airline to try and get a ticket to Hong Kong, and she steals Hope's credit card information to do so. Again, good use of, she's doing something immoral, but you can kind of see she's under such duress that maybe it's justified. It doesn't go through, so then she has to go see Trish. Trish ends up being her best friend / adoptive sister, and they have a very interesting relationship, which gets touched on much more later in the series, but I would like to say, this series and this relationship in particular shows the strength of the side characters in these shows. I think we had some of this with Foggy in Daredevil, less so with Karen, but she was there and she has a character.
Karen is a little outlier because of we don't like her for her actions in Daredevil.
Sure.
But and I think you're going to get some of that with Trish a little bit, just because she's got this hubris about her.
Yeah.
But she's much more likable than Karen, and they have good interactions. And she's a really good actress. I don't know her name, but she does a really good job. And I believe that they are friends. Like, it never seems forced.
Yeah, and actually this character is interesting too because it's one of those things that's a comic book thing. In the comics, she becomes a character later known as Hellcat. And they actually make reference to it a couple times in the show because people keep bringing up that she used to have red hair. Her natural hair color is red, or at least it was on the children's show she was on. It was kind of like Hannah Montana, I think it looked like, from what we see of it. And Hellcat from the comics has red hair that sticks out of her mask, and that's one of her distinctive things. They kind of imply that in this show, maybe eventually she will become Hellcat. They at least reference it. I don't know if they'll ever go through with it.
The thing is, she's not at all... She doesn't have any superpowers. She's just hubris-driven. I don't know if she gets them in the comics, but in this, I don't think they ever would give them to her. What I think would happen is she would try to Batman this shit and fail.
I think in the comics she does, and it has to deal with the devil, similar to how Spider-Man dealt with Mephisto.
Hellcat.
Yeah,
makes sense.
So she gets powers from that. I don't know if they'll ever touch on it because they haven't dealt with sort of the mystical realm yet, though Doctor Strange is coming, and we'll start seeing more of the magical part of the Marvel Universe, so I can't imagine they would do it before then, but after, like, Doctor Strange, and if we ever see Ghost Rider, then it wouldn't shock me at all, because Ghost Rider deals with Mephisto directly. Ghost Rider gets his powers.
Ghost Rider would only be cool if he was the villain.
Nah, see, I like Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider, I think, would actually make a good Netflix
Not the
show.
first. I'm saying a good Netflix show, but I'm saying like the first time you see him, he's got to be a villain, and you can kind of Winter Soldier that shit.
Oh, sure, you could. You could actually do. It'd be interesting. Do kind of what they're doing with Punisher in Daredevil Season 2, because there's talk about maybe doing a Punisher show after that. So
sure, because I like Frank Castle.
Yeah.
He's cool. So,
But anyway, she's a good side character. She lends a lot to Jessica's character. I think their relationship informs them both very well, and the performances between the two, again, very solid. After this, she says she'll give her the money or whatever, but Jessica is convinced to go to the hotel where she knows that Hope is at. This is a good scene, too, when she's walking down the hall, getting ready to break in and help Hope, and she pulls the fire alarm as she walks down the hall. The lighting changes, she gets some flashbacks and stuff. Again,
because
visually...
The thing is, Kilgrave takes Hope to the same exact hotel room he used to keep Jessica Jones at.
Yeah.
And this whole thing, moving forward, you just need to know right off the bat, Kilgrave is just always tormenting Jessica Jones. Like, that's his thing. That's his goal in life at this point. It's his motivation because of what happens, what happened earlier but is revealed later. He is just hell-bent on making sure that he just fucks with her life.
There's something about those two, and maybe it's just the performance, or maybe it's something about the characters. Sometimes you have a pairing of a superhero and a villain that is just perfect. Something about their personalities and abilities complements each other in a way that makes writing them very pleasant.
The only other one I could put on this is the Joker and Batman. Like, those are the two dichotomies that work really great. Jessica Jones and Kilgrave are obviously very, very dark. But Batman and Joker get pretty fucking dark at times. But Kilgrave is just on a different level.
I really enjoy these two characters together and all the conversations that they could have. Jessica Jones and the Purple Man, very recent creations. I think they came out around 2000, which, I mean, relative to comic book history, very recent. So I'm hoping with this show coming out, she becomes more popular and they start writing more stuff with her. Because I could see her as a character becoming sort of this classic character, especially with a villain like that. I could see that becoming a popular thing. I mean, it's certainly more, quote, edgy. It's more, it's more graphic.
Well, it was made for adults.
I know, and that's why I think it works, is that it's a superhero created for adults by adults, and it doesn't have a bunch of bullshit. It cuts it, and it's like, no, this is serious. There's certainly levity, but it allows it to breathe and be adult. So anyway, now Jessica goes and finds Hope in the bed, and she's laying there just staring at the clock, and it turns out Kilgrave has told her not to move. His power set is making people do whatever he tells them without question. So she's been laying there for 5.5 hours staring at the clock, and she has apparently wet the bed, and Jessica's like, I gotta get you out of here. And this is the perfect introduction to Kilgrave's powers because it is creepy, and it makes the point fairly quickly. She literally pulls her out of bed, and she kicking and screaming the whole way is like, no, I can't move, I can't go. And it's not just that you have to do what Kilgrave wants you to do, it's that it makes the thing he tells you to do the thing you want absolutely most, and you have to fucking do it. It's not just that she couldn't physically move, it's that every fiber of her being was telling her, you need to stay in this spot. It's crazy. Great performance. I like that Jessica just kind of dealt with it. She was done with her shit, and she's like, no, we gotta go. I gotta save you. Takes her out. Brings her to her parents, and pivotal scene. Hope tells Jessica, thank you for saving me. You saved my life. And Jessica clearly has this look on her face of like, oh, yay, like, good. I did something good. And you think, knowing that this is a Marvel show and not a movie, I kind of went, God damn it. And Hope walks down the hall. Elevator starts to close. Jessica sees her pull a gun out of her purse and starts to shoot her parents because she is still under control of Kilgrave. Wow. That's
messed up. And then I like there's a moment Hope is holding the gun and she's still clicking it even though it's empty.
Yeah.
And then she stops clicking, looks at the gun, and is kind of like out of it for a minute, and then drops the gun, falls to her, she just sits down in there, and then just starts screaming. Like it took her a bit to fall out of it.
Yeah. Man,
that's so well played. And they do that when he affects people too. It takes time. It's not just an immediate yes. It's always, it takes a little bit to take effect. And that's just such a good touch. She could have easily just started screaming immediately after that. Like, I don't want to do this. But just, it's so much creepier if she slips out of it and it's slowly revealed to her. Because you can kind of see in your head, like, the veil being lifted up. And then she's fully cognizant of what she's doing. Like, that's a great touch.
What I would call the oh shit moment, because Daredevil had this too. Daredevil had two moments where I was kind of like, oh shit, this is serious. This show is going to be very good.
Head smashing indoor.
Head fisk. That's one too, but that came a little later. But my first two are definitely the hall fight scene, which is still one of the best scenes in Daredevil, and when that dude spiked his own face onto that fence. Those were the moments where I went, oh shit, this show's taking itself seriously. Good. This moment came in the first episode, which is good. I'm glad they did it. I think the biggest difference, because I've seen the whole series of both Daredevil and this, the difference between Daredevil and this is that Daredevil started out real strong. In the middle, it kind of slowed down. Not that it was bad or anything, but it definitely slowed down, and then at the end, it finished fairly strong. This show was fairly consistent the whole time, and it started off like, boom, crazy thing happening, investigations, you gotta figure stuff out. Very well paced, and this episode was the perfect start to the story. It immediately made you like the characters, even though they do some shitty things. It made you curious as to their motivations and what had happened. It made you want to know what the deal was with Kilgrave, and especially with this ending, with the making her shoot her own parents and making Jessica watch. That made you go, oh, this is going to be a good show, and I want to see them face off.
Yeah, I like that they can show you a brief, like, and this isn't even like a complex thing he's done with his powers. It's just two simple commands, and it just shows you the gravity of the situation and why Jessica's so scared.
Yeah.
And it's so informative without bashing you over the head with it. I really enjoyed it. And I love that later on in the season, we actually get a ton more Kilgrave than I thought we would get.
Yeah.
Looking at the trailers, I thought we would get like snippets here and there, and then the big reveal would come near the climax of the season. But the whole thing's a climax so far.
Kilgrave basically, as opposed to Fisk is definitely the antagonist of Daredevil. You see him occasionally, and he's looming in the background at all times. Kilgrave, as prevalent as he becomes, like post-episode 7 or so, he's basically a tertiary character. He's also the antagonist, but he's also a side character. He's in this enough where he is a supporting actor. He is there all the time. You see him, obviously, not as much as Jessica Jones, but you probably see him just as much, if not more, than some of the friend characters. He's all over the last half of this series. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's so fantastic so far. So overall, I'd say the very first episode of Jessica Jones knocked it out of the park. I mean, I've only seen one person say they didn't like this, and that person can't be trusted. So It's getting very, very good reviews. If you don't like this, you just don't like good television. You don't even have to like comic books to like this show. It's just a good show.
Yeah, and if you like Daredevil, you'll love this show. There's less fighting, for sure, but the intrigue is there, and the villain-hero relationship is there. And if you like Marvel stuff, it's still in there. It's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so there's just so much to like.
Yeah, it's I can't recommend it enough. When I finish it, it will probably rank higher than Daredevil for me, which is hard to do because Daredevil I hold in very high regard as far as it's both a well-written show and a really good superhero show. So, like, just in general, I would watch that even if I didn't like comic books.
I would say, as far as Daredevil v. Jessica Jones, as someone who's watched both, I like them equally, but for different reasons, and that's the perfect way to do it. I didn't want to feel like they were trying to recreate Daredevil, and they weren't. They're both creating different shows. One's more of a crime drama with political intrigue, and one is more of a investigative show about this woman and her friends trying to take down this one guy. It's very good and very different, and they both fill different niches while also appealing to the same audience. So very impressive, excited to see what they do in the future. And we will be back to check out more episodes. So thanks, everyone. If you want to check out our reviews of Daredevil from last year, you can check out the whole playlist right here. You can always check us out on Twitter at @TheRealUnpop.
You can always subscribe and get more of our reviews of other stuff that doesn't have anything to do with this.
You can always donate to our Patreon campaign.
And that's it.
So, thanks everyone. Until next time, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this has been Unpopular Culture with Jessica Jones, Episode 1.